So the fallout from Rishi Sunak's net zero speech is still ongoing. Remember, this has not made a lot of the people in the Tory party very happy. It's only really helped a very small, or at least a small few in the Conservative Party, very happy. Now, going forward, we've said this before, abandoning these net zero policies, abandoning this move towards net zero, to investing in our green industries, to building these future jobs, decarbonizing the steel industry. I've said how good that policy would be. This is a jam today policy. This does nothing for the country long term. It only makes a very small people in the Conservative Party very happy, and an increasingly smaller voter base of the Conservatives somewhat happy that they don't suddenly have to start buying an electric car, even though, as we've said before, and this has been thoroughly debunked, look, the second-hand car market, petrol cars, they will exist long after that date. But what do Conservative MPs view about this? We have heard some over the weekend being overwhelmingly positive. Those, of course, are the anti-net zeros. And, of course, those who are the upset ones making the loudest noise are the ones who see this actual potential of this green policy future. But, interestingly enough, Conservative Home has got comments from Conservative MPs saying what they think to Rishi Sunak's net zero speech. Now, I want to point out that not one of these comments is sourced. So we do not know which Conservative MP is saying this, even if it is actually a Conservative MP. But I'm willing to give Conservative Home, at least in this case, the benefit of the doubt, as they are somewhat influential in the Conservative Party and they do have those links. So in this case, I'm willing to say that these comments do come from Conservative MPs until, of course, unless proven otherwise. I do think these will come, that have come from Conservative MPs. But like I say, unless evidence surfaces otherwise. But you'll also notice none of them are sourced. Not one of these Conservative MPs seems to have, shall we say, put their name to these comments, which is interesting. But we'll see what these Conservative MPs have had to say about Sunak's net zero speech, because some of them interesting, others recognizing that abandoning these things makes us look bad, and others even pointing out the fact this isn't really going to be a big vote winner for us. And of course, you've got the overwhelmingly bizarre, enthusiastic ones. But let's dig into these comments. But before we do get over to them, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button. And of course, down below, there are links to my Patreon page and a one-off link called Buy Me Coffee, where you can, buy me coffee. And of course, as always, there is the YouTube thank you button, the YouTube Pony Club down below. Again, you can join as well. And of course, as always, thank you very much to all those people who do help support the channel. Even if you do just click on the like and share button, it all helps. So let's see what some of these Conservative MPs have had to say about Sunak's net zero speech. So this is the first one. He said, or at least they, because we don't know who this has come from, "I've changed my view on climate change. I still think it's real and a big challenge, but I do not think the world is coming to an end. There simply isn't the evidence to back up the rhetoric over those claims. So I think Rishi has got us into about the right place. My guess is that it will be popular despite the outcry in the media. I'm a bit more confident of keeping my seat than I was a week ago." Put your name to that, M. Put your name to it. Let your constituents know that abandoning these net zero pledges, that if they live in rented property, that their landlord does not have to insulate their house or do anything to help improve the heating situation in that rental accommodation. Put your name to that comment. Please, Conservative MP, put your name to it. I would love to see what your constituents, especially if they live in rented accommodation, have to say about that. Anyway, this is the next one. Quote, a huge step forward in acknowledging what many of us have been saying about the unaffordable, not true, and unrealistic measures, then not true, put in place to reach net zero. The tech just isn't ready yet. Again, not true. At a price people can afford. Also, again, not true. The exact time gives much needed breathing space for our innovators to come up with better. We already have that technology. The government needs to be investing in these things. There is a ton of net zero stuff we need to be investing in. Wind farms, geothermal, especially on the coast. We can take huge advantage in that. That would help heat tons of houses on the coast if they were to tap into that. There's the onshore wind farm, offshore wind farm, solar energy we could be looking into. There's a ton of different initiatives. The decarbonization of the steel industry that I talk about all the time. There is a ton of stuff we should be, and the government should be putting their money into in terms of subsidies and other things, even money into innovation as well to drive this supposed innovation so that people can come up with better. Is Rishi Sunak doing that? No. This is just a complete abandonment of these green policies. And as we covered just this weekend, when Prince William got absolutely embarrassed on a world stage, people at the UN and the ambassadors at the UN feel as if Rishi Sunak has just, flipped them off. It shows just how bad the UK's reputation in the world had become. Brexit had done a lot of damage, and the only thing that was keeping us on there was the fact that we did COP26, and there was a lot of force that Britain was going to be a big help to be a driver of these green policies. Rishi Sunak's just gone, no. Yeah, makes us look really good on the world stage. This really good. Anyway, the next one. Saying, I agree entirely with what the Prime Minister has done about changing our approach to net zero. It's a good first step towards restoring some kind of reality on this. Well, okay, what do you mean reality on this? What do you think we should be going forward to? Again, you can see they've asked for sort of small quotes, but the stuff, if these, MPs had, shall we say, put names to their quotes, then we could question them even further on what they thought on this. And this is where you say if they had been put names to it, you could have questioned them even more. I've said before, I think Labour should be making absolute hay on this over the weekend, especially on that rented accommodation promise, because that's a big now charge passed from the landlords onto the renters that mean that they now have to pay for all that extra heat that they're going to lose because landlords would have had to insulate all these properties by law. Oh, guess they don't have to do that, meaning that those renters, especially, once again, we're coming up to possibly another quite cold winter. What's going to happen to all those renters now having to pay an increased amount on their heating costs? It says it all. It says it all. Labour can be making absolute hay on that. But anyway, he continues. The, quote, net zero religion is going to force us to change our lives radically, making us poor and cold. Again, not true. That's definitely someone who's very right wing, believing on that take on it, without any certainty that this will actually achieve anything. Yes. There are tons of studies, papers, business cases out there for moving to net zero. It's all gone too far and has lost the support of the British people. Have you actually checked the numbers on this? The British people do not trust the Conservative Party at all on the environment now, on climate change, and now, wouldn't surprise me, on net zero. Like I say, remember, Rishi Sunak, just recently, before he had made these announcements, had tumbled even more in the polls. I wonder how much more he's going to tumble in the polls after these announcements. So, next one. It's an embarrassing to retreat from these targets, but I don't blame Rishi for that. It was Theresa and Boris setting impossible targets. These weren't impossible. They were ambitious targets, targets that we could have reached. And I think, as I think the infrastructure civil servant said it as well, it sends a very, very obvious message that the UK is going to look at challenges and it's going to run from them. Even when it sets ambitious targets, if it encounters any problems, it's not going to try and overcome them in way or find ways to how it can achieve those targets. It's instead going to run away. It has set a very, very bad precedent. But he continues. So they could say that they were very brave and had this important legacy. Then Rishi is left to provide the reality check. You can pass any law you like. You can pass a law declaring that the moon is made of blue cheese, but that doesn't change the reality. The reality was you could achieve those net zero targets. You had to be ambitious. You had to pass ambitious policy. You had to spend the money. The Conservative Party has not had that ambition. It has not had the creativity to come up with the policy to match those ambitions, and it has not been willing, not only in just this area for net zero, but in every single area we can see, for not wanting to spend the money that projects need to actually do, to actually achieve them. Next one is a short one, saying it's a bloody good thing. Let's hope he goes even further. Someone else says, apart from the patricians, those from the green industry, Skidmore, etc., all will be most very happy. I don't think so. Another one said, I was very happy that we are remaining committed to our overall target, but being pragmatic about what we have to do and how we do it. Well, you actually haven't said that at all. That hasn't come out yet. So far, Rishi has said a lot, but he's put no policy forward. But it doesn't set a very good trajectory of what those policy efforts are going to be if he puts any policy at all forward. Like I say, it sparked a very large discussion. Rishi's on somewhat of a policy blitz at the moment. It's not just net zero. There's a ton of stuff. The inheritance tax, HS2, also conversion therapy we've heard as well. So there's a lot of news coming out very, very quickly. But back to it. So a lot of what he said are taking people with us. I've been saying for months, so very positive. Doesn't really send that message at all, to be honest. If you look at the polls, what the British public say about all this stuff, mostly good common sense, telling the truth, etc. Only a few zealots or those with vested interests will mouth off. Again, these are not common sense. It is the abandonment of ambitious, possible, and achievable policies if they had the slightest interest of actually doing this, but they do not, because they're not interested in it. Someone else said, I thought it was the most comfortable and authentically Rishi that I have seen for months. Realize that when he was talking, that net zero is a policy area suited to his explaining the trade-offs in politics and lives and the need to get technology and finances right. There is also lots of people quietly worrying about the changing of cars and boilers and thinking that the eco-loons aren't telling the truth. That's not true. People have been telling the truth about what the transition needs to be in regards to these technologies. But to do it, you have to have the policies in place, the investment in place to be able to do it. America's done it. Europe's doing it. Why can't we? And I've said before, going back on these, abandoning these policies puts the UK behind. And if we do not do something about this soon, we will fall incredibly far behind compared to everyone else. This is, as I've said before, this is the new industrial revolution change. And you have these people that have been saying, oh, yeah, it's good to abandon all this stuff. No, these are the modern Luddites, where we can see that these steam engines, these new machines coming in will change industry. But oh no, Luddites, no, we've got to stick with our horses. We've got to stick with, hand working only tools. We've got to keep, those weavers and cottage industries in check when they could make all sorts of transitions and done all sorts. But we're not talking about 17th, 18th century economic policy at the moment. But never mind. But yeah, that's where we are, unfortunately. And the more stuff we do not do this about this now, the more and more further behind the UK falls, and that will be a huge detriment to the UK. So if they decide that he is the one leveling with them, it will be good for the country and more interesting politics for us. So interesting that he's gone, oh yeah, people think that these eco-loons aren't telling the truth, but Rishi's the one who's really leveling with them. He's doing it for the good of the country. And it makes more interesting politics for us. There's a ton of papers, stuffs out there that people have been putting out for years about the benefits, about the pluses going in this direction would bring to the UK. They've just ignored every single one of these. But he continues, or at least they continue. The question is whether it's too late to have a reset and whether MPs can pull together on something so emotional. National Grid announcements also overlooked as a big ticket item for business confidence. The next one. I'm all for hard-headed pragmatism and fairness in getting net zero, but I am not at all comfortable with him trying to make political capital out of rolling back environmental measures. He did need to change the rules on oil boilers, but there was no need to push back the ban on the sale of petrol cars. I don't actually think it's good politics. What with measures like stopping nutrient neutrality, he is sending a strong message that he does not care about the environment. First PM for a very long time, not trying to be green. The danger is we are seen as the nasty party, and he is seen as a cold-hearted technocrat. It only tickles the base, but risks alienating mainstream voters. And that's what, to be honest, seems to be coming across. That he doesn't really care about being green, when we have seen this really care, that voters do really care about that. One of the things that we've seen a lot of people saying is that this is not going to break out beyond the Westminster bubble, and that seems to be the case. Next one, who said, really good. I'm all for improving the environment, but in a practical way. What is this practical way? This is something that we've heard continuously, mostly from these people who have been pleased about it. What is this supposed practical way, or this better way? Why haven't you been putting forward these ideas? If there is a better or even a more practical way, where have you been putting forward these ideas? What is the more practical way? They continue. I support energy security strongly. The PM has listened and been bold. The start of the fight back? Question mark. Again, too little, too late. The next one. By definition, climate change is a global issue. The UK accounts for approximately 1% of global emissions compared to over 30% of China, whilst the US and India are also major emitters. Even if we close down the entire UK economy, it still wouldn't scratch China, opening one and sometimes two coal-fired power plant stations every month. So while we could certainly continue to, quote, do our bit on climate change, the PM is quite right to say that we should do it in a sensible and proportional way. What? Oh, that's definitely someone who's definitely a climate skeptic, because that's what you hear from them all the time. Oh, but it doesn't matter if we do it because China opens like one or two coal. Who cares? Like, who cares what China does? Focus on us and the fact that we can move to green technologies and all this kind of stuff that could be massive for the UK. And economists and business people have been writing about this and telling government about this for years. Anyway, next one. He said it was a much needed outbreak of common sense. Again, common sense says you should not have done this and focused more on moving towards these green technologies. And if some of you are saying that there's a more, quote, practical way and a better way to do it, why have you not been proposing those better, more practical ways? So it was a much needed outbreak of common sense that many of us have been calling for some time, particularly those in the blue collar conservative group that represents the view of the hardworking British people. Kind of interesting. The blue collar conservative group it's just another group we can add to the Conservatives that supposedly exist but doesn't exist. The Prime Minister's statement was simply a statement of the blindingly obvious. And he was right to say that the government has ploughed on regardless. The backlash to those measures, the cost they would have incurred on people would have been seismic. The Prime Minister is onto a winner here. Again, this whole idea comes from Uxbridge. The whole idea that they managed to hold on to Uxbridge because it was an anti-ULEZ campaign, being it was anti-green. This is where this is all coming from. This is why this has happened. Just we lost in Uxbridge. And this is the direction they're going in. It is so short-sighted because there is nothing long-term. This is just a jam today policy. It is not going to help the UK long-term. They've got no long-term plans about anything else. And this sets a really bad precedent, because if you've got this short-term termism in government that we've had since Cameron came in, we've seen what that is. It's short-term policy that does not really help the UK and makes things infinitely worse because they don't put enough investment into it, they don't do it properly, and then as a result, it doesn't end up working, or it just doesn't really solve the underlying problems. So, next one. The Prime Minister's absolutely nailed it. He's completely right to say that those who advocate the net zero bans and restrictions have never set out what that actually means and what it will actually cost. That's completely false. You can find those online. There have been, again, as we've said throughout all this, there is papers, there is business cases, there is a ton of stuff out there that these anti-net zeros don't care. They don't care to go seek it out because they are just simply not interested in it. The PM has positioned himself and the Conservative Party on the side of hardworking families and on the side of being sensible and pragmatic. Not when you look at the polls, where you can see British voters want good environmental policy. They want to move towards net zero. They want to see these types of investments you've just said we're not doing. Yeah, it's not a good look. Keir Starmer's Labour Party have abandoned the working classes that Labour was set up to represent and is on the side of the billionaire global elites and eco-fascists. I know where I'd rather be. Well, is that Lee Anderson? Because that sounds like him. At least we can know potentially who that might be. I am like 80-70% sure that quote comes from Lee Anderson, because that sure sounds like him. Next one. The first Prime Minister for many decades to have the courage to take on the supremacy of the British Green lobby, who tolerate no dissent from their views. Britain produces, here we go, less than 1% of the global CO2 emissions, and we are reducing them at a faster rate than almost all the other major G20's industrial competitors. You mean because we have, or at least your government has participated in one of the biggest deindustrializations in those G20 countries? Might also be a reason why those emissions have gone down. But once again, just because we produce so little CO2 does not mean that we should not go in this direction, because Europe are, America is, why aren't we? It sets a very, very bad standard. It sets it to invest business investment, a ton of stuff that we are not doing this. It's not going to be good, to be honest, in the long run. But he continue, or well, they continue. Rishi understands that reduction of emissions are essential, but at a rate which does not harm the British economy, and it puts us at a disadvantage to our European competitors. This is the big thing. This whole idea of, oh, you don't understand. If we reduce emissions, this just makes us non-competitive. Which, bear in mind, when you look at our productivity, we have the lowest productivity in Europe compared to those European competitors. So we're already not competitive. The British economy is already not competitive when it comes to that. We become less competitive because we're no longer in the EU. We've seen exports fall. Strange how this argument only comes up when it refers to net zero, but anything else, oh no, the British economy is great. British economy is wonderful. But what about productivity? What about this? Oh no, the British economy is wonderful. But what about net zero? Oh no, we can't do that. That'd harm the British economy. Anyway, next one. I was impressed by it. He only said what most ordinary people with busy lives and mounting bills are thinking. Again, if you look at the polls, the British public says the entire different thing. Like I say, if we went into net zero, if we went into energy security, we invested in solar, wind, tidal energy, geothermal, all this stuff that since David Cameron has been talking about, that if we had done over those 10 years, we would have now set up and ready to go. We would not be having this energy problem, this energy crisis that we have had. And we are going to go into another one. Rishi Sunak and Conservatives hoping that it's going to be a warm winter. Then at least people won't be complaining about it as much. That's their hope. But he continues. So where are we? So bills of thinking. Be responsible towards the environment, but don't lose sight of the challenges that we face today. What about not just today? What about the tomorrow and the future? Again, jam today politics. And don't try to do the work for other countries for them. Again, other countries pollute more than we do. Why should we go green? A couple of other things. I think people are mixing up targets, where we're going, and milestones, the things that we do along the way. He's not changed the former. Net zero 2020, 2050, staying, but he's moved some of the latter, e.g., the dates relevant to boilers and cars. And then, of course, the last one. Very happy with the Prime Minister's statement. I much prefer pragmatism to ideology. Again, most of these people definitely have come from an anti-net zero stance. They didn't seem to get many, or at least maybe reach out to many of these green conservatives. There's only one. I think it's this one that probably gets it right, and I think that's the true comment that you've got to take away from this. First PM for a long time, trying not to be green. Danger is we are seen as the nasty party, and he's seen as a cold-hearted technocrat. It only tickles the base and risks alienating mainstream voters. I think whoever said this comment, that is entirely right. I think he's absolutely done that, and I think Labour, the Lib Dems, can make absolute hay of this. Absolutely. And remember, just was it last year when the Conservatives in Australia lost massively? Why did they lose? They even wrote an entire blog on Conservative Home warning UK Conservatives that if you do not care about the environment, if you do not go towards net zero, if you engage in this climate skepticism as we did in Australia, you will lose big. And that was credited to their loss in Australia. And shockingly enough, I don't know if I have Australian viewers. I think I do, but it wouldn't surprise me if my Australian viewers would say that the Australian Conservatives have started to move away from the climate skepticism towards doing some of these green policies. It's what people want. But the Conservatives, once again, living in this bubble of, oh, this is going to be fantastic. This has not played well. This has not played well, because if you go and you talk to people, even if they have an anti-net zero stance, the idea that these policies aren't good for like the long term of the UK to build a better economy in the future, to increase jobs. This is stuff that people have been talking about going all the way back since David Cameron, and encouraging Cameron, you need to go green, you need to do this, you need to invest in this, you need to go this way, because this is where everything else is going. America's going in that direction, Europe's going in that direction. Our government, well, I think it might maybe make us hold on to some seats, so we'll can them for now, and maybe if we win the next election, we'll see, or whatever. We'll see what happens. But as always, thank you very much for watching, and of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.